Okay, we're going to look into a little bit deeper into the pre-Columbian transoceanic contact theories that are out there, and a little more information on them. I recently did a video on Ramses and the cocaine mummies that they've found and how they've detected it in a large group of them, and then a few separate groups did the same type of testing and found the same thing. And we have to invoke some kind of like giant cocaine parties all over a bunch of mummies and stuff, and tobacco and things. And of course, they found marijuana in some of them and so on too. But that's from over there anyhow. But the oddity in all of this really is the tobacco and the cocaine, which don't show up as being anything that could be from Europe that would pull off the same type of thing. There are closely related plants that are in that same family that we know now, taxonomy and stuff, and they figure it all out. But nightshade and all these things, and belladonna and all these slightly related plants that don't really have the same thing. They all contain certain toxins, and those certain toxins are derivatives which we've taken and used for medicines. It's extremely advanced, like willow bark can make aspirin, and so there's all these ancient things that come down from shamanistic things from back in the time before time, if you will. And when we have these videos, I like this. This is controversy, and it gets something else known because hopefully I reach other people I haven't reached before. Some will interject something that'll show me something new. Um, and I've looked at a lot of information on this. I've been doing this for years and years, and I'm not trying to have an argument with my own people. That's beyond anything that I'm attempting to do in any way, shape, or form. This is finding out more about it, and I find this a whole lot better than just trying to debunk whether or not black people were some certain place at some certain time, because that becomes simplistic. And all you have to do is show certain things. Whenever we look at real history and going through things like this, it shows you there's a lot of odd contact. Now, in just one simple phrase, the history of boats. They have boats on walls with masts on them. Now, they don't have a sail on the first couple ones here, but they have them going back. I have some pics of 16,000 BC and so on. They go back farther than that. Once that they kind of and they start freaking out on it's funny, boats were supposed to be about 4,000 BC, and then there's this and there's that, then they date this site and they say that it's about 16, and they keep digging, and even lower there's a boat, and stuff, and they're like and so, but they're not willing to go past that, and there ends up being these barriers and these margins and what people are willing to believe and not believe. Okay. And it seems that ancient Americas had some people. There was a whole lot of animals here that we know about. We had an ancient camel type animal. There was a myriad giant cave bears. My brother and I used to have this diorama and stuff. Really, it was mainly his. That was a diorama that had saber-toothed tigers and all the stuff that was around there, in a La Brea tar pit and all this type of stuff when we were kids. And I had studied this, and of course, finding out about tar and bitumen and so on like that. One thing I haven't showed in a video, and I plan on putting it in a piece coming up with the Sumerian connection to Egypt, is ancient bitumen that they have found that have barnacles on it. And if you know anything about marine biology and so on, that has to be a saltwater ship that stayed in saltwater for a long period of time to end up creating these barnacles that are, dime to nickel sized barnacles that are on there, and the species that they are and so on. And it definitely shows you that these vessels that might have been going up and down a creek, up and down a river in the Euphrates and Tigris and so on, are definitely going farther past that. And Gilgamesh's tales of going off to far lands are actually farther than what we were trying to think of at the time. And it's a correlation that we have a hard time putting together as a people because of the dogma that we're given whenever we're children, and all the things that everybody tries to attach to a biblical thing. We almost by this time should understand that what we should do is not try to attach anything to a biblical timeline at all, and look at it as raw. After we get the data all set, then go, and how does that compare to anything biblical? We shouldn't do it the other way around, and that's the way science has been done until just recently, and it still is. To this day, people start getting out of numbers, and what's funny is we've gotten way expounded past the biblical timeline and the possibilities of what it talks about, and yet somehow people are still trying to bring that in and incorporate it as being, yeah, and that still fits, and what if Neanderthals it was Adam, and all this type stuff, or Cro-Magnon was Adam, yeah. And I've heard all these theories and stuff, and that's not what the biblical tale really is. So people keep trying to fit square pegs in round holes, and sometimes you can get a square that's small enough it'll fit in a round hole, and then they go, look, and it just really doesn't fit. And again, I'm not here to argue this point, but I'm here to debate it somewhat. And if somebody can show me something other than the truth and fact known, and I'm looking at something I know for a fact is debunking it, or is trying desperately to debunk it. So let's and to leave you with this, at least leave you with a sense of wonder enough to go, well, nobody knows. That's what they want to kind of leave you with, and they don't give you enough information that they don't seem to have, or just don't want to put together. If they want to put together a nobody knows, if they want to put one together, it's like, looks like this. It's real simple to add in just a couple of paragraphs and you'd have it. So I'll vamp a little and see what goes on. Pre-Columbian transoceanic contact theories relate to visits or interactions with the Americas and or indigenous people of the Americas. What do they show on that? So they show Amerindians, and they're showing a bunch of the Mayan type people, and this looks like it's from Peru, but I'm just guessing on the looks of the women that are there, and they seem to be a non-super Spanish influenced Peruvian. But let's go from there. And so that's indigenous. Okay, you know me, I can't get a damn sentence in it, can I? But you do know, if you've been watching my videos, that we now have Caucasians that have come in that predate any of those people, which are an Inuit, Eskimoid, Trans-Siberian people, right? And the Clovis after people, right? That show up, that's them and the native Amerindians. But then I have a video that shows you these definite Caucasians, which look like the Proto-Indo-Europeans we're talking about, and their skulls and all that. Now that correlates to being, hey, these are those people, and they went all the way across. And oh yeah, well, when the water was all sucked down because it was all up in the glaciers, that land bridge there was a whole lot more efficient than what we were looking at before. There's a whole lot more. Okay, so now they predate them by thousands of years. Then it's almost undebatable. And then we see things like the Wari culture and stuff, and all these blonde and red-haired remnants that are down there that somehow people later tried to correlate with, oh, well, Spanish people. And it's like, well, Spaniards don't have that much influence to it, and the people there didn't. And now you're trying to tell me popcorn shows up more often there than it shows up in the Spaniards themselves? Right. So anyhow, but this is peopling from Africa, Asia, Europe, Oceania before Columbus' first voyage to the Caribbean in 1492. Such contact is generally accepted in prehistory, but has been hotly debated in historic periods. So it's it falls on the edge of that da da da. So 2 historical cases of pre-Columbian contact are accepted amongst the scientific and scholarly mainstream. Successful explorations led to Norse settlements of Greenland and the Anse aux Meadows settlement in Newfoundland some 500 years before Columbus. And they got a picture of it here, so I'll show it to you. This is them recreating it with a mid-sized Viking longboat, and they know at the time they had larger longboats than this now, literally double the size of this boat here, right? But then at the same time, you're seeing this replica and this Phoenician replica here and this other pseudo-Phoenician replica here. And in that, they're all making the journey. And they said it took a ship this big to do it. And the funny thing is they're doing this. Well, have you seen my Thor Heyerdahl video where he makes it on a reed boat? He makes it on a reed boat that's a replica of a Sumerian reed boat from way back when. They have depictions of these that look like they must be that style at some 2600, 2800 BC. Yeah. And then if you look at the scratchings on walls and cave art that go back to like 7,000 BC, it will. And if you look at the amount of oars that it looks like the people have and the little stick that's in there, then you go, well, that holds more than this boat right here. Oh, yeah? Yeah. Oh, and they got oars, and oh, wait, there's a mast on that bitch. Why would you have a stick sticking up if you didn't put something on it? What's that? Don't tell me it was just a, well, what do you want to go with on that? But, yeah. So let's just go back a little bit here and recase here. The scientific and scholarly responses to other post-prehistory, pre-Columbian contact claims have varied. And so there's different times people interject. Some such contact claims are examined in reputable peer-reviewed sources, and it sure has been. And there's, some Phoenician writing and things we'll get into anyhow. Other contact claims, typically based on circumstantial and ambiguous interpretations of archaeological finds, cultural comparisons, comments in historical documents, and narrative accounts, have been dismissed as fringe science or pseudo-archaeology. And I'm telling you that if it didn't involve the New World in a different period of time, and we were just talking about people that you didn't think possibly could have gone from this side of the Mediterranean to that side of the Mediterranean in a boat that was seaworthy, and it showed up with the exact same amount of cultural comparisons, archaeological finds, historical documents, like in the Bible when it tells you they went to go get 10 and all that type stuff and where the hell that is, narrative accounts, stuff like that. And would that be dismissed as fringe science or pseudo-archaeology? No, okay, well, but this has to be. And why would it have to be whenever there's this much? Look at this data here that's on all this. But so Norse transoceanic contact. Norse journeys to Greenland and Canada are supported by historical and archaeological evidence, and I think we all agree on that now. A Norse colony in Greenland was established in the 10th century, so hey, 500 years before, and lasted until the mid-15th century with court and parliament assemblies taking place at Bethalio and Bishop at Grodor. The remains of Norse settlement at Lansum Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, were discovered in 1960. And after everybody had already wrote it all off. So whenever this came out, they were like, yeah, and so what? And it's like, well, hold on a minute. You need to retract your crap. Ta-da. But no, we still have this mentality of no. And you go, well, was this the first time through? And what about the Bering Ice Bridge and the people that had run around over there lollygagging up in the high end, huh? You think any of them made it across? They seem to have been pretty ice ability people. They seem to be cold adapted people. They seem to be able to have evolved into a higher order during an ice age, right? Lansdale Meadows is the only site widely accepted as evidence of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact. It was named a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in '78. It is also notable for its possible connection with the attempted colony of Vineland, established by Leif Erikson around the same period, or more broadly, the Norse exploration of the Americas. And, ooh, man, so we could just go off in left field and peg this one in the North exploration of the Americas and the places that they found about that. But I think there's about 5 correlating datas off there and coming all the way down the Hudson. And then there was a big debate on whether or not the sword and armor type that was shown by these people that, they are so deep into armor, it's not even funny. I've got a few books on it over here and everything, giant thick ones about different armor and stuff. But and different weapons and different types of pole arms that they had, spears with glaive guisarms and billies and different things that are made to pull people off horses and to stab into the ground and take off horse riders and all kinds of incredible things. And people debate on small fractions of when certain ones were in play and came into play hard and all this type of stuff. And they've had a big debate on it, and it came up between something like 650 and 800 AD. That's what that sword is exactly, and they're willing to have a Norse battle about it. But and of course, hey, just like in the Bible, whenever they tell you prophecies and they wrote it much later, how about somebody 400, 500, 900 years later, somehow a Roman, no, how about somebody even after the fact, just somehow heralding the Templars, coming down and putting that in way the hell after that, but they had nothing to do with the ancient people 800 years before. But it's exactly like that, and both of the things kind of match it. I mean, we can go with that one too, but then which one sounds a little more foolish? If we didn't put it in the Americas, which one sounds more foolish? If we trace them into the Americas right before that and then say, well, could it have happened before that, and it only ends up being 200 years earlier, could we accept that? So you see, it starts to pinch in on when it could be, and we start to see these people who came here before, and then there's these people come here at this time here, and they're going to get closer and closer in time, and sure, there's a gap in between, but a gap in between what? Well, early Caucasoids coming in before the Amerindians, and then early Caucasoids explorers finding it again, before finding it again, before even Columbus found it again. Right? I mean, the Perry Reese map shows you something like 1519, that they have the whole thing of South America all mapped out and all this other BS and attachments to Antarctica, and yet 1492 is when we came over and they didn't even go down there, and what the hell are you talking about? It says it's from early source maps which were already disintegrating, and he did it out of posterity, huh? Yeah, the whole world was flat BS too, and we could go to that, but let's not do that. I can't even get a paragraph in here. Few sources describing contact between indigenous peoples and Norse peoples exist. Contact between the Thule people, and that's an ancient thing, and I could do a whole one on Thule and Greater Thule. And Norse between the 12th and 13th centuries is known. The Norse Greenlanders called among these incoming settlers Kralingar. Conflict between these Greenlanders and Skrælings is recorded in Icelandic annals, right? And this is something that even plays into a few other tales that come later. But the term Skrælings is also used in the Vinland sagas, which relates to events during the 10th century when describing trade and conflict with some native peoples. And people have put this to being, okay, well, this must have been the Inuit type people or something like that then, and how radically different they were from them, what that was. But then there's that third group that apparently wasn't that other one that they got into a fight with, and it was over in Vinland. So how is an who? Never mind, let's go on, people. Claims involving sweet potatoes. Now, the sweet potato, which is native to the Americas, was widespread in Polynesia when Europeans first reached the Pacific. And this is what I was talking about to somebody else, and I could lose that on the sweet potato. And some black guy brought up something about sweet potatoes, and I'm like, oh. Sweet potato has been radiocarbon dated in the Cook Islands to 1000 Common Era. And current thinking is that it's brought to central Polynesia, 700 CE, spread across in Polynesian, so all the Polynesian peoples from there. It's been suggested that it was brought by Polynesians who traveled to South America and back, or that South Americans took it to the Pacific. And if you've watched Moana and the little thing that's about that, and you can see these boats and these things that people had and stuff, and the histories they have off of it, and you're like, okay, well, there were some people that during that time were much better seafarers than anybody is actually willing to go and see what's going on. And these Phoenician trawlers and things are very much more capable than those type of boats, and they seem to have fine things with it, and all they got to do is dip their finger in the water and watch the stars. Yeah, when we know the Phoenicians and all this stuff and it starts to get is it more or less possible when you start to see things like this? And this is literally trying to show you different things to just blur your mind and get you confused, probably short of me talking. Um, it's possible that the plant could successfully float across the ocean if discarded from the cargo of a boat that was on a shoreline on the other side. Phylogenetic analysis supports the hypothesis of at least two separate introductions of sweet potatoes from South America into Polynesia, including one before and one after European contact, too. So it's funny they discredited on the second sentence, and there's also this whole thing about coconuts floating around in too. There's this whole thing we could do on coconuts and where they are now versus where they apparently were, and when people look at them in ancient times and stuff, and then where they spread to. And if that's not bad, how about the Phoenicians? Date palm. In fact, people think Phoenician just means purple dye or it means the phoenix. And there's a third triad of symbologies in there where it actually is talking about Phoenices. That's the date palms. And then they are spread around that whole Mediterranean area in a primordial time we know of that mimics some kind of Johnny Appleseed effect. But that's probably another video all in itself, and it doesn't involve the Americas necessarily. But then again, when we do the date palm one, I'll show you how it actually has some involvement. A team of academics headed by University of York's Mummy Research Group in Bayaco, while examining Peruvian mummies at Bolston Museum, found it had been embalmed using a tree resin, which sounds very Egyptian, which it is thought to be Peruvian mummies were naturally preserved. The resin found to be that of Acacia conifers, so it's a tree sap, the same type of thing, related to the monkey puzzle tree, was from a variety found in Oceania and probably New Guinea. Radiocarbon dating both resin by the body of University of Oxford's radiocarbon laboratory confirmed they were essentially contemporary date around 1200 of the Common Era, and that's the high-end register. They're not going to give you the low and high. I think it had 150-year POW on it there, so it would have been 1050, right? And monkey puzzle tree, they're a pretty cool little tree here, and the way that they look, it's kind of a neat conifer effect. It's an evergreen. It's actually one of the more primordial type of trees that they felt like were back way back when, and a lot of these evergreen trees, and funny how that keeps coming up with evergreen trees. But claims involving California canoes, and I won't even read that to you, but they have California canoes that are there, and they match Hawaiian canoes, right? And they also weirdly match a Tonga canoe, ones that they found there, and they say, well, people didn't come over here, but that could lead to some of the interactions of, and genetics would have to prove this, 7P might know about it or somebody, where some of their genetics comes from and matches people that have come over in the Amerindians, as opposed to all being a Southwest Eastern and another more Aleutian type of people. It's the Samoans also, and then Marshall Islands. And when you look at the variations of the Marshall Islands versus the Hawaiians versus the Samoans versus the Tahiti, you get something that shows up too. And this also they've used to trace them running through the islands. But then when you look at the thing that's not talked about, the other part that is the difference, that shows you, oh, these people, oh, wait, hold on. So Fiji is more, Solomon Islands and Fiji are more connected to these people over here than these people are over here. And this seems to be some offshoot, and they went way down a road with that idea. Claims involving chickens. And so you wonder where chickens come from. And it's funny, in Roots they even talked about smell like a wet chicken, and all this type of stuff, and they didn't even have chickens and stuff. Black people didn't have chickens. Chickens come from South Pacific, and they've been genetically changed, and when people look back at the DNA of chickens, they can find that there's this unique form that's started to be domesticated a long time ago, and out of more of that Proto-Indo-European people. Let's see, the existence of chicken bones dating from 1321 to 1401 in Chile, though, are thought to be genetically linked to South Pacific Island chicken land races, South Pacific contact with South America. The genetic link between South American Mapuche, to whom the chicken were thought to originally belong, chicken bones and South Pacific island species have been rejected by more recent genetic studies, which concluded that the analysis of the ancient and modern specimens reveals a unique Polynesian genetic signature, and that a previously reported connection between pre-European South American and Polynesian chickens most likely resulted from contamination with modern DNA, and that this issue is likely to confound ancient DNA studies involving haplogroup E chicken sequences. In recent years, though, evidence has emerged suggesting a possibility of pre-Columbian contact between Mapuche people, or the South Central Chile people, and Polynesians. Chicken bones found at the site El Arenal in the Horatio and there's L again, an area inhabited by Mapuche, support the pre-Columbian introduction of chicken to the South Americas. Dun, 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 dun. The bones found in Chile were radiocarbon dated between 1304 and 1424. Therefore, the arrival it predates the arrival of the Spanish. Chicken DNA sequences were matched to those of chickens in American Samoa and Tonga, and dissimilar to European chickens. Right? However, a later report in the same journal looking at the same mDNA concluded that the Chilean chicken specimens clusters with the same European, Indian, subcontinent, and Southeast Asian sequences, so the primordial chicken's the same damn thing, providing no support for a Polynesian introduction of chickens into South America. But at the same time, it says pretty much that, if I'm not mistaking things, that's pretty much all from the same bout. One came by land, two if by sea. Okay. Linguistics. Dutch linguistics and stuff in Polynesia. And I don't even want to go into this. This goes into ideas of New Zealand, Maori, Polynesia, Eastern Island, all that type stuff. The sweet potato again. And it shows you how it pulls through. If you want to look at it, it's on the site here. But they have these Kamaro sweet potatoes, right? And New Zealand and stuff. And they're like, well, that's your yam. There it is right there. And we have them in America. Well, we know how we got them here. But then again, look at hey, hold on a minute. And there's a few plants like that show up in an odd timeline that don't agree with the after 1492 timeliney situation, like wha-bam, trees, stuff like that. Similar features of genetics that they have, though. Several human skulls were found in a museum in Concepcion, Chile. These skulls originated from Mocha Island, an island just off the coast of Chile in the Pacific Ocean, formerly inhabited by the Mapuche. Craniometric analysis of the skulls, according to Lisa Matiso Smith of the University of Otago and Jose Miguel Ramirez Aliaga of the Universidad de Valparaiso, suggests that the skulls have Polynesian features, such as a pentagonal shape when viewed from behind, and rocker jaws on them. And of course, there's rocker jaw is seen in some primordial people too. And so a primordial, slightly untouched, non-genetically force-changed island people that would contain that same trait from ancient genetics, becoming entrapped into a mixed Denisovan island people, and then carried over into Polynesian features and things at a later date. Correct me if I'm wrong. From 2007 to 2009, geneticist Eric Thorsby and colleagues have published 2 studies of tissue antigens that evidence an American genetic contribution to the Easter Island population. That's in the middle of nowhere, if you know where Easter Island is. And now they look at them and, hey, did you know the whole bottom half of them has art on them and things, and they're still on their bellies with their hands, and it looks like Göbekli Tepe. Yeah, and then they got the symbolism all on their back of them, and a few of them actually show some ships. Yeah. And when I was a kid, we had the Styx album, Pieces of 8, and it had them on the front of it. And I got all off into it and everything, and they dug one of them, but not totally out and everything. And oh, wow, made a connection. I remember when I first saw the Göbekli Tepe T sets that show a T-headed anthropomorphic creature. And the T, and how the T goes with the T of ancient sign language that seems to be the same letter T and a a nasty gesture, if you will, in a lot of cultures that you can find in Sumerian art of them showing it to each other around the tree of life, like a sex, a multiply, a thing like that. It all has these connotations with it too. That'd probably have to be a whole nother video. Anyhow, so mDTNA haplogroup B41A1, right? Research back in 2013, which is formerly found among Polynesians and other subgroups of Australasians. And this was based on analysis of 14 skulls that belonged to B41A1A. So this exacting group pretty much in this pooled genetic line, while 12 belonged to subclads of mDTNA haplogroup C1, common among Native Americans. The research team examined various scenarios, none of which they could say certain were correct. They dismissed a scenario, direct contact in prehistory between Polynesians and Brazil, as too unlikely to be seriously entertained. Seriously. But B41A1A is also among the Malagasy people of Madagascar, which experienced significant Australian settlement in prehistory. The authors described as fanciful suggestions that B41A1A A1 among the Botocudo resulted from the African slave trade, which included Madagascar. So there's a showing there. A genetic study produced in Nature showed some Amazonian Native Americans descended partly from a founding population that carried ancestry more closely related to indigenous Australians, New Guineans, and Andaman Islanders than any present-day Eurasians or Native Americans. The authors, who included David Reich, who I've shown you a few of his information packages, that the signature is not present in the same extent or at all in present-day Northern and Central Americans, or in a 12,600-year-old Clovis-associated genome associated with a more diverse set of founding populations from the Americas than previously expected or accepted. And so, again, we're not looking at people that came down from a land bridge, are we? But we're totally cool with these primitive island people being able to do all of this, but you're not willing to give people that are maritime trade people all across the Mediterranean, which if you can go across the Mediterranean, you can go across a lot of places. And if you can go to the Pillars of Hercules and out, and you just take that same distance and straighten it out to your left, you can easily get to someplace. But that can be possible. But these canoe people with a bone in their nose, they had it going on. You follow me, right? And we're not asking for too much more time before that. But if we find out that these boats and these people had them going around the coastlines, going back some almost 30,000 years, and at what point they would have made a boat that could have been seaworthy around a coastline, not necessarily out to sea. You can get on a life raft and you can live out at sea forever if you don't get into a big swelling rage or storm, of course, and you might even make it through that. You think about things along those lines, and you get people still like they want to throw up a hand and go, oh, there's this whole Jehoshaphat, it's terrible. Claims of East Asian contact and Paleo-Indians, and there is a Ladane contact and so on, and they find that Chinese people had gotten here a long time before. It says that's pre-Columbian trade, right? Bronze working had not been developed in Alaska at the time, and suggests that the bronze came from nearby Asia, possibly China, Korea, or Russia. Also, the house were found the remains of obsidian artifacts, which have a chemical signature that indicates that the obsidian is from the Anadyr Valley in Russia. In June 2016, Purdue University published the results on 6 metal and composite metal artifacts excavated from late prehistoric and archaeological content at Cape Epsenberg in the northern coast of the Seward Peninsula in Alaska. Also part of the research team was Robert J. Speakman of the Center for Applied Isotope Studies at the University of Georgia. They're basically pumping these people, telling you this ain't BS. Um, and Victor Mayer, Asian Languages and Civilizations, University of Pennsylvania. The report is the first evidence that metal from Asia reached prehistoric North America before the contact with the Europeans of late, stating that X-ray fluorescence identified two of these artifacts had smelted industrial alloys with large proportions of tin and lead. Presence of smelted alloys in prehistoric Inuit context in northwest Alaska was demonstrated for the first time and indicates the movement of Eurasian metal across the Bering Strait into North America before sustained contact with Europeans, but shows contact with Europeans. If you show this word sustained, let's just end that sentence differently. Eurasian metal across the Bering Strait into North America before we ever thought they were here. Eurasian metal across the Bering Strait into North America way before people are willing to accept. Eurasian metal across the Bering Strait into North America from Eurasians that are Proto-Indo-Europeans before contact with more Europeans. This one's getting on in time, 35 minutes, damn, okay. This is not a surprise based on oral history and other archaeological finds. It was just a matter of time before we had a good sample of Eurasian metal that had been traded. We believe these smelted alloys were made somewhere in Eurasia and traded to Siberia, then traded across the Bering Strait, and oh no, nobody could go. No, no, they traded it, and then the canoe people. Are you serious? They know there's boats at this time that are so much more capable than the canoe people, but they didn't do it. They didn't know. They was scared. And canoe people. I'm not even going to finish that part here. Times of contact with Ecuador. Genetic studies suggest possible contact between Ecuador and East Asia. The study suggests the contact may have been transoceanic and late coastal migration. Did not leave genetic imprints, though, in North America, right? There's Chinese contact that they talk about here. I'm just going to ravel now because we're gotten on. And I'll do a separate one about the Asian Chinese. Well, we can't necessarily say Asian, can we? We can't really, because Asia is really, I mean, Anatolia is Asia Minor. So when we talk about Asian, it becomes this thing where, and in your mind, you think it's got to be these Japanese, Chinese people on the coast. And it's not necessarily talking about that, like Jemon periods and so on that they talk about. Zuni languages and isolated languages. And all this gets into the idea of the Proto-Indo-European languages and so on, and how that easily comes up to there. And people say, oh, but no farther. In Copan, they show ideology that shows you symbology that has something to believe in this same concept. Carvings and so on are left on the things. These creatures here in India are holding maize-like. It looks like corn. It looks like corn, right? And of course there's the Olmec claims, and black people want to claim the Olmecs, but they have indigenous people. I've got a video where they take an indigenous non-negroid person that looks just pretty much like that, except for the eyes. Those eyes are screwed up. Black people won't have those eyes either. And this thing again is like 8 feet tall, but in proportion or whatever, they have a local there. They have bigger lips and stuff, and he's sitting there. He's one of the guys that does tours and does things, and wham, he matches one of these. There's another one they show where some younger kid matches it and all that, and the upper turned jaw and the lips, and then they have this fine hair braided down the back of it, and blacks want to claim them as braids. It's like, you're not going to claim braids, are you? Anyhow, Van Sertima agreed that these statues depict settlers or explorers from Africa, but he doesn't want to say that they're Africans and so on. Well, I don't think that this is an African type people. I think this is more of that Inuit and a cross type thing. And you see exaggerated facial features like this in Moa, and you see them somewhat in the New Zealand population, but you see them in Samoans and stuff. They're a whole lot more. And that just a minute ago showed an attachment where they see it in genetics, and then you go, well, here's these Olmecs that look like that, and you go, well, Oh, they must have an attachment to it. No one's going to go there. They go 9, 10. They go not to the. They run to the 10-yard line and then fall down and fumble. Yeah. So pre-Clovis migration from Africa, Gideon excavated and said he believed that humans might have not come overland from Asia, but from boats from Africa. But I think they slapped that man in public. With the journey taking place over 100,000 years ago, I'm sure they bitch slapped him. Montreal R. Waters, geneticist at Texas A&M University. I know who that is. I've played golf with someone kin to him. Noted that the absence of genetic evidence in modern populations to support Gideon's claims involving Arab contact. And here we have it again, and I just showed it in another video where they have through the islands some ancient Arabic, not even Arabic, it's really a Libyan Egyptian dialect that talks about this in these islands out in the middle of nowhere. It's the island where the mutiny on the Bounty ended up, for Christ's sake. And Phoenician contact. Ooh, here we go. Here's something good. Here's a Bat Creek inspection, and people all said, "Oh, look, Hebrews," and it's like, no, that's Proto-Phoenician right there. And in fact, Hebrew is a derivative off of it. That's where they got their language from. People used to say, "Oh, Hebrew and Hebrew Phoenician," and it's like, no, and it's Phoenician. And they try to come off in the Bible in a lot of places that there's these Canaanites, then there's these Phoenicians and stuff, and it's like, well, what did the Phoenicians call themselves? They call themselves Canaan. I mean, come on, people don't. It's funny, people get so caught up in one edge of the study they don't actually take and go, well, hey, I've got a piece of puzzle over here, and it just looks like it might fit in your puzzle over there. Hey, why don't you do that? And cross studies has really brought a lot of nice things in. People that were able to get one degree and then go for another, if you know what I'm saying. Doesn't happen too often. People will pick one exact finite thing and run it to an nth degree into a needlehead, and then stand there with the rest of them and try to be on their little hill. Phoenicians and other Semitic groups had crossed Atlantic in antiquity, ultimately arriving in both North and South America. This opinion was based on his own work on the Bat Creek inscription, and ideas were held by John Philip Cohane. Cohane even claimed that many geographical names in America have a Semitic origin, and it's funny, this was embraced by the Jewish population as being C, and there's even linguistics that show you that a few ancient tribes in the Americas, one of them attaches to the people that are known in Pet Cemetery that you see there, and all the ancient tales. And I did one that mentions it slightly, but it was really more of a Halloween tale and a mythology thing about the Wendigo and how it comes through in the Micmac Indian burial grounds. And there were quite a few Indians that were known to have what seemed to be, AdWords taking in replacement words that they had, words from other languages that people knows from other linguistics. How did they get that word there? Be like, it's funny. It's like they talk around Uno and neck talk in junk on Britney Spears, lie in on ween on boat, young yang is on metal, and you're like, what? Right, but those people don't exist anymore, so I guess we just can't ask them anymore, huh? European contact, Solutrean hypothesis. I made a video about this, and there's even crystal clear spearheads that look just like these, and they're all in these special burials, and these people in this red ochre burials, and they're buried on their left and facing to the east, and a little round pre-womb situation with these special crystal and flint and obsidian special arrowheads that are from this one group of people that evolved out doing these things, and they end up in America. In contrast, before, here we go, 20,000, 15,000 BC, Paleolithic 16,000 PEG, and 13,000 BC. So they're here at 16,000 coming in Paleolithic New World during the Paleolithic area. So what are these people? Well, we find out that, we couldn't find any skulls. Oh, now we found a couple of them. Oh, they're Proto-Indo-Europeans. They're not the Asiatics. The Asiatics come later. Right? I don't know. It just starts to get real conspicuous. And again, I'm a man on the fence. I tell you, I'm a man on the fence, even though I've done this